thought finding himself would feel like a revelation, a moment, a sentence, a sudden clarity that would land inside his chest and say, "This is who you are." That was the hope, at least. Instead, he found people. It began on a gray morning when the city felt like it was holding its breath. He stood at the bus stop with a backpack that carried less than it should have and more than it needed to. Inside were a notebook with mostly blank pages, a worn sweater that smelled faintly of home, and a letter he had never opened. He told himself the letter was for later, after he became someone worth reading it as. He had quit his job 2 weeks earlier, not because he hated it, but because it felt like wearing someone else's life. Every day he woke up already tired, as if his soul had clocked in before his body did. His friends called it a phase. His parents called it irresponsibility. He called it survival. The bus arrived late, like everything else in his life. He took a seat by the window and watched the city stretch into unfamiliar shapes. Buildings softened into fields, fields into roads that seemed to lead nowhere in particular. He felt lighter the farther he went, but also strangely hollow, like a house after everyone has moved out. He imagined that somewhere along this road he would meet himself. Not the version shaped by expectations or fear, but the real one, the quiet one, the honest one. Instead, the first person he met was an old woman named Eleanor. She sat beside him without asking, holding a paper bag filled with oranges. Her hands trembled slightly as she peeled one, and without looking at him, she offered half. "Vitamin C," she said. "Good for long journeys." He hesitated, then accepted it. They rode together for 3 hours. She told him about her husband, who had died 10 years earlier, but still occupied most of her sentences. She spoke about him as if he might suddenly appear at the next stop, apologizing for being late. "I used to think grief was loud," she said, staring out the window. "Crying, screaming, breaking things, but it's mostly quiet. It's the sound of no one asking how your day was." He didn't know why her words settled so deeply inside him. Maybe because he recognized the quiet. When he told her he was traveling to find himself, she smiled, not kindly, not mockingly, but knowingly. "You won't," she said, "but you'll find pieces. Just don't throw them away when they don't look like you expected." When she got off the bus, she waved once and disappeared into the crowd. He never saw her again, but that night he wrote her name in his notebook. In the second town, he stayed at a cheap hostel that smelled of detergent and old wood. There he met Matteo, a street musician with a guitar missing one string and a laugh that arrived before his words. Matteo played every evening in the square, even when no one listened. "Why do you keep playing?" he asked one night, sitting beside him on the cold stone steps. Matteo shrugged. "Because silence asks too many questions." They talked about dreams the way people do when they're afraid to admit they still have them. Matteo wanted to record an album someday, but life kept asking for rent instead. He had learned to live in the space between someday and never. On the last night, Matteo let him hold the guitar. The wood was warm, as if it remembered every song ever played on it. "Play something," Matteo said. "I don't know how." Matteo smiled. "Neither do I. I just keep trying." The sound he made was awful, uneven, uncertain, but Matteo clapped anyway, loud and unapologetic. Later, alone in his room, he realized something frightened him. He hadn't thought about himself once that day. He walked for days after that, through towns where no one knew his name and forests where even names felt unnecessary. His legs ached, his thoughts quieted. In a small village near the mountains, he met a boy sitting on a bridge, throwing stones into the river. The boy couldn't have been more than 12. His shoes were too big, his silence even bigger. They sat together without speaking for a long time. Finally, the boy said, "Do you think people leave because they want to, or because they don't know how to stay?" The question hit him harder than it should have. "I don't know," he admitted. The boy nodded, as if that answer confirmed something painful. "My mom left last winter," the boy said. "She said she'd come back when things were better. I don't know if that means she's waiting for things to change or for me to stop needing her." He had no words that could fix that kind of hurt, so he did the only honest thing. He stayed. They watched the river until the sun dipped low and the air turned cold. When he stood to leave, the boy asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" He opened his mouth to say no. Instead, he said, "Not yet." But for the first time, it didn't feel like a lie. Halfway through his journey, loneliness returned, not as an ache, but as a weight. He missed familiarity, missed being understood without explanation, missed the version of himself that existed in other people's memories. One evening, in a town so small it felt temporary, he opened the letter he had been carrying. It was from his younger self. He had written it years ago during a night when everything felt unbearable. The handwriting was uneven, desperate. Please don't become someone who forgets how deeply we feel. Please don't trade honesty for comfort. Please don't disappear. He cried then, not quietly, not neatly. He cried for the boy who had believed so fiercely in a future he couldn't yet imagine. He cried because he realized he hadn't been lost. He had been hiding. Near the end of his journey, he met a woman named Clara on a train heading back toward the city. She was reading a book upside down. When he pointed it out, she laughed. I like to see how stories feel before they make sense. They talked until the train slowed, until words became something they shared instead of exchanged. She told him about leaving a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt empty inside. I kept asking myself who I was, she said. Then one day I realized I'm who I am when I'm with others. The rest is just noise. When the train stopped, they hugged like people who understood that some connections are not meant to last, but are meant to matter. When he finally returned home, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The streets were the same, the buildings unchanged, his reflection familiar but softer somehow. He sat in his old room and opened his notebook. Names filled the pages now. Eleanor, Mateo, the boy by the river, Clara, dozens more. He realized then what the journey had been teaching him all along. He hadn't been searching for himself as a destination. He had been uncovering himself in moments of connection, in listening, in staying, in allowing himself to be moved. He was not one single answer. He was a collection of echoes. And for the first time, that felt like enough.